Hester Ainsley reckoned the whole coach party's account in her head: lodging, 12 horses fed, the mended axle, 3 bottles of claret, to the last farthing, faster than the Duke's own clerk could open his ledger. Then she was sent back to the scullery like she'd said nothing at all. She did not flush. She did not argue. The Duke's man of business sneered before 9 travellers. The girl guesses. A gentleman calculates, and charged the party 14 shillings too much. She corrected him aloud, to the penny. The room went silent. The Duke did not laugh. He set down his glass, looked at her the way no one ever had, and the next week his carriage was on the North Road again, for no reason the roads explained. If you've ever been judged by your station instead of your mind, this story is for you. Subscribe and comment the town you're watching from. I want to see how far Hester's story travels. The rain came down on Aldmarsh the way it always did in that black November of 1861. Slow at first. Then, all at once, it ran off the slate roof of the Wheatsheaf Inn and pooled in the yard where the coaches used to stand. There were no coaches now. Not many anyway. The great mail run that once thundered through the town 4 times a day had gone quiet, and the reason was 30 miles east, laying down iron track and stealing the road's whole living. Inside, a girl sat at the end of the long common room table with a candle and a ledger. Her name was Hester Ainsley. She was 22, though the town would have guessed older, because worry ages a face faster than years do. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's steady hands, and between the two of them she had inherited the inn, its debts, and the whole weight of keeping the roof over them both. She was reckoning the week's takings. She did not use the counting frame. She never did. The beads sat in a drawer, gathering dust, because Hester carried her sums in her head the way other people carried a tune. Ale sold, bread baked, the 2 travellers who had taken a bed on Tuesday, the farrier's account still open from the harvest. The figures moved through her mind and settled into columns without a slate. When she wrote them down, she was only copying what was already finished. The takings came to £4, 9 shillings and 2pence. She stared at the number a long moment. Then she closed the book. £4, 9 shillings. In the good years, that had been a single busy night. Across the room, her father sat by the fire. Josiah Ainsley was a big man gone soft with age, his shoulders rounded, his eyes clouding over a little more each season. He could still find his way about the inn by memory and by touch. But he could not read a ledger anymore. He could not see the figures that were slowly drowning them. So he did not know, not fully, and Hester did not tell him. That was a kindness, and it was also a lie, and she carried both. "How does the week look, love?" he asked. "Well enough," she said. She was a truthful girl by nature, but there are truths a daughter keeps from a father whose sight is going, and this was one of them. There was a letter folded in the drawer beneath the ledger. It was from the Ridings and County Bank. It said, in the flat and courteous language such letters always use, that the mortgage upon the Wheatsheaf Inn stood at £180, and that the sum was called due. They had 60 days. If the money was not found, the bank would take the house, the land, and the sign that had hung over the door since her grandfather's time. 60 days. She had counted them the moment the letter came. 53 remained. She did not tell her father that either. "You should be abbot," Josiah said. "It's late." In a while. She listened to the rain. She had a strange habit, when the worry got too large, of turning it into arithmetic. £180 over 53 days came to a little more than £3. 7 shillings a day she needed to find. The inn earned nothing near that. So it could not be earned. It would have to come from somewhere else. And there was no somewhere else. She had done that sum 100 times, hoping the answer would change. It never did. Numbers were honest that way. It was the one thing she loved about them. They did not flatter, and they did not lie. She snuffed the candle at last and went up the cold stairs to bed. She did not know that the wind was already turning. She did not know that 30 miles north on the Great North Road, a carriage had lost the light and was looking for shelter. She did not know that the storm which was ruining the roads that night was, in its clumsy way, bringing something to her door. It came near 10 o'clock the following evening. She heard the horses first, a great many of them, more than any farmer or drover would bring. Then the wheels, and a man's voice in the yard shouting for the ostler, and the door of the wheat sheaf swung open and let in the wet and the wind and a party of quality such as the inn had not seen in 2 years. There were 9 of them, all told, gentlemen in good coats, a lady's maid, a valet, and men to see to the horses. They had been driving hard for Scotland, and the storm had beaten them off the road. They wanted beds, all of them, and a fire and supper, and the horses saw to. 12 horses, Hester counted, without meaning to. 2 carriages and 12 horses, and 1 broken axle that had cracked on the last mile and would need mending before dawn. And at the centre of them, shaking the rain from his hat, stood a man she took at first for nobody in particular. He was perhaps 35, tall, plainly dressed for a gentleman, with a tired, watchful face and grey coming early at his temples. He did not shout. He did not order. He stood a little apart while the others made their noise, and he looked about the old common room as though he were reading it. When his eyes passed over Hester, behind the counter with her sleeves rolled and her apron on, they paused. Only for a moment. Then they moved on. She learnt his name from the sharp little man who came bustling up to the counter and set down a leather writing case as though he owned the place. "His Grace the Duke of Wexbourne will have your best rooms," the man said. "See the horses are properly done and not robbed of their feed, and I'll settle the account myself in the morning. I keep His Grace's books, and I'll thank you not to pad them." This was Silas Crowle. She disliked him within the minute, and she was not a girl who disliked easily. He had a way of looking at a person as though he were pricing them and finding them cheap. He looked at Hester exactly so. "The rooms are ready, sir," she said, "and the feed is honest." "We shall see," said Crowle. They were a long time settling. She and the 2 girls she had left flew about the kitchen, and her father worked the taps by feel, and somewhere near midnight the whole party was fed and warmed and ebbed, and the 12 horses were foddered, and the axle was in the wheelwright's hands by lantern light. Hester sat up. She always did, on a busy night, to see the fires banked and the doors barred. She was there in the low glow of the common room when the Duke came back down. He had not gone to sleep. He came and stood by the dying fire, and he did not seem surprised to find her there. "You keep late hours," he said. "So do you, Your Grace. I don't sleep well in strange beds." He looked at the ledger, still open on the table where she had left it. "You keep the accounts here?" "I do." "Your father's in." "My father's in." "My accounts." He looked at her then the way he had looked at the room when he came in, as though he were reading her and finding more written there than he had expected. It was not the way men usually looked at her. She was used to 2 kinds of looking, the kind that saw a serving girl and dismissed her, and the kind that saw a young woman and lingered where it had no business to. This was neither. This was a man who had found a number that did not foot and wanted to know why. He said good night and went up. She sat a while longer, unsettled, and did not know it was the beginning of anything. The reckoning came in the morning. The party gathered in the common room to break their fast before the road, and Silas Crowle set his writing case on the long table and opened his ledger with a great show of care. He wet his pen. He meant to make an occasion of it, the settling of the bill, because it let him be the important man in a room full of his betters, and men like Crowle live for that. "Now then," he said, "let us see what this house imagines it is owed. he began to add. He said the figures aloud as he went, half to the room, and Hester, standing by with the tally in her apron, listened. She had a slate in her pocket, a worn thing of grey stone she had used since she was a child, but she did not take it out. She did not need it. She had done this sum in her head the night before, while the fires died, the way another girl might have gone over a letter from a sweetheart. Crowle added the beds. He added the suppers. He added the ale and the stabling. He came to the horses and mistook the count, and then corrected it, and then lost his place, and began again, and a little sweat showed on his lip, because the room was watching and the sum was long. £12, he announced at last, 11 shillings and 4 pence. The room stirred. It was a great deal, and no more than the truth, for it had been 9 people and 12 horses and a broken axle. But it was not the truth. It was wrong. "Beg pardon, sir," said Hester. "But that is not the figure." Crowle looked up as though a chair had spoken. "The girl," he said to the gentleman, "will now instruct me in arithmetic." A few of them laughed. Not the Duke. He had set down his cup and was watching her over the rim of it, quite still. "You've left off the axle, sir," Hester said, evenly. "The wheelwright was fetched at midnight and worked till 3. That's his charge, and the timber both. And you've counted the horses at 10. There were 12. 2 came off the second carriage. That's 2 more feeds and 2 more stalls. And the claret. 3 bottles were sent up, not 2. She did not raise her voice. She did not hurry. The whole account is £14, 7 shillings and 6 pence, to the farthing. There was a silence in the room of a particular quality. It is the silence that falls when a thing that was not supposed to happen has happened in front of witnesses. Crowle's face went a dull red. He bent to his ledger and began, furiously, to add. His pen scratched. His lips moved. The room waited, and the waiting was the worst thing that had ever happened to him, because every second of it said that the girl had been done before he had begun, and that she was right, and that he was checking her. He came up at last with the answer. He did not say it. He did not have to. His face said it. 14, 7 and 6, said the Duke of Wexbourne, quietly, into the silence. Pay the house, Crowle and Crowle paid. £14, 7 shillings and 6 pence, counted out onto the old table, while the girl who had beaten him watched with her hands folded and her chin level. She did not flush with triumph. She did not gloat. She had simply told the truth about some numbers, which was the only kind of telling she was ever really easy with, and if the world found that remarkable, that was the world's affair and not hers. The Duke rose to leave. His party gathered itself, but at the door he stopped, and turned and looked back at her across the room. "You did that in your head," he said. "It was not quite a question." "Yes, Your Grace, the whole account, before he'd finished the first column." "Yes," he nodded, slowly, as though filing the fact away somewhere it would keep. Then the carriages were brought round on their mended wheels, and the whole quality party rolled out onto the North Road and was gone, and the Wheatsheaf was quiet again, and £14 heavier, and Hester went back to the kitchen as though nothing at all had happened. Something had happened. She only did not know its size yet. There was one more thing, and she thought nothing of it at the time. While Crowle had been packing his case, sullen and beaten, a paper had slid loose from among his ledgers and lay a moment on the table. It was a rent roll, a list of the moneys owed to the Wexbourne estate by its tenants. Hester's eye fell on it as she cleared the cups, the way a swimmer's eye falls on the bottom of clear water, without effort and without meaning to. She saw the column of sums. She saw the total written at its foot, and something in her, the same something that would not let a wrong bill pass, murmured, almost without her leave, "That doesn't foot." Crowle's hand shot out and took the paper up. "What did you say?" "Nothing, sir, and then, because she was honest, and because he had earned it, only that your total there is short of the column above it, by some £33 near enough. But it's none of my concern." He stared at her. For a moment, just a moment, there was something in his face that was not contempt. It was closer to fear. Then it was gone, and the contempt came back over it like water closing. "You mistake yourself," he said, "and your better's business." He shoved the paper deep into his case, and he left. She forgot it by noon. She had 53 days and £180, and no idea how to make the one cover the other, and a stray figure on a stranger's rent roll was the least of what pressed on her. She put it out of her mind. But it had lodged, not in her mind only, it had lodged in his. The carriage came back on the Thursday. There was no reason for it. The Duke of Wexbourne's seat lay a full day's drive to the north, and there was nothing in Oldmarsh a duke could want. But the carriage came, mud to the axle, and the Duke got down and came into the common room and asked, with a straight face, whether a glove had been left behind on the night of the storm. A grey glove. He was most attached to it. There was no glove. Hester looked, because one does, and found nothing, and told him so. "A pity," said the Duke, who did not seem sorry at all. He stayed an hour. He drank a cup of the inn's poor tea, and asked her about the town, and about the railway that was killing the road, and about how a house kept its books when the trade fell off. He asked good questions. He listened to the answers as though they mattered, and when he left he said he was glad the glove was no great loss, and drove away north, and Hester stood in the yard and thought that dukes were stranger than she had supposed. He came back the following week. This time it was a road survey. There was talk, he said, of the county improving the North Road, and he had an interest in it, and he was seeing the line for himself. It took him, apparently, straight past the door of the wheat sheaf and no farther. He stayed the afternoon. Her father could not see the Duke's face, but he could hear a great deal in a voice, and he was not a fool. "That's twice," Josiah said when the carriage had gone. "A grand man doesn't drive 2 days for a lost glove and a road he owns already." "He's only passing," said Hester. "He's not passing, love. A man passing doesn't ask the ostler which is the girl's father." She did not answer that. She had begun to carry a feeling she did not know what to do with. It was not hope. She would not let it be hope, because hope, in a girl of her station over a man of his, was not a feeling. It was a foolishness that ended in ruin, and she had seen it end so for others, and she was not a fool. She put the feeling in the same drawer as the bank's letter, and she shut it, and she went on with her sums. The market day came at the end of that month, and with it the thing that changed the town's mind about her. Market day filled the common room. Farmers, drovers, factors, the traffic of a whole district come to buy and sell and drink. And that day, by no accident anyone could name, the Duke of Wexbourne's carriage stood in the yard again, and the Duke sat among the gentry travellers by the fire, and Silas Crowle sat sour at his elbow. And the room was full, and everyone could see. The talk turned, as men's talk does over ale, to a wager. One of the gentlemen had a dispute of figures. It was a thing about a wager on a horse, and shares of a purse, and a division that had gone wrong among 3 of them, and none could agree who was owed what, and the argument grew hot and loud, and no one could settle it. Crowle was appealed to, and made a labour of it, and got a figure, and was at once disputed. And the Duke of Wexbourne, in a voice pitched to carry across the crowded room, said, "There is no need to trouble Crowle. Ask the girl." The room turned, every head. To Hester, behind the counter, with a jug in her hand. She could have died of it. She knew, even as it happened, exactly what it was. It was a duke, before a room full of the town and the county both, setting aside his own man of business and calling upon an innkeeper's daughter to do what a gentleman could not. It was a thing that did not happen. It broke a law that no one had written down but everyone lived by. She felt the whole room feel it. "Come," said the Duke, and there was something almost gentle under the challenge of it. The wager, and the shares, and the 2 men who dropped out, and are owed their stake back. Settle it, Miss Ainsley." So she set down the jug. And she settled it. She did it aloud, in front of them all. The purse, the stakes, the 2 who had withdrawn and were owed their money, the 3 who remained, and the shares between them, one part being double another by the terms they'd struck. She walked it through, plainly, the way she'd have walked a child through it, and at the foot of it she gave each man his figure, to the shilling, and asked them was that not the bargain they'd made, and one by one, grudgingly, marvelling, they owned that it was. The room was silent again, that same silence. But it was larger now, because the room was larger and half the town was in it. "To the shilling," said the Duke. He was not looking at the gentleman. He was looking at her, and he was, very slightly, smiling. I have never in my life seen its equal. And Silas Crowle at his elbow sat with his face like ash, and hated her. That was the day it turned. Afterward, in the market and the lanes and over garden walls, they talked of nothing else. A duke had deferred to Hester Ainsley. The innkeeper's girl had settled a gentleman's wager, while the great man's own clerk sat dumb. Some told it with wonder, some told it with a curl of the lip, because a girl who forgets her place is a scandal to the sort of people who have nothing but their place. Both kinds told it, and under all the telling ran a single new thread that had not been there before and would not now be pulled loose. The Duke of Wexbourne kept coming to Oldmarsh, and everyone had begun to ask why. Hester knew why. She would not say it, even to herself, in words. But she knew. What followed had no name, and that was the danger of it. He did not court her. A duke does not court an innkeeper's daughter. There were no flowers, no declarations, nothing a person could point to and call improper, and that was exactly why it was so hard to stop, because you cannot stop a thing that is not happening. What happened instead was figures. He began to send her his estate accounts. Not all at once, a page at a time, folded in with some small pretext, carried down by a servant or left when he called. A rent roll that would not balance, a steward's account he could not make sense of, a column of repairs and wages and the price of seed. He sent them as though asking a favour of a clever neighbour, and she took them as though granting one, and between them they both knew it was neither. It was courtship conducted in the only language they could safely share. He wrote her the estate. She balanced it and wrote it back. Where his stewards had erred, she found the error and named it, in a small neat hand, in the margin. It was the most improper correspondence in the county, and there was not a word of love in a line of it, and it was all love, every figure of it. There were other things, small things. Centimetres. He learned that she took her tea without sugar, and after that, when tea was made, hers came without, and he never said a word about the knowing of it, and neither did she, and it undid her a little every time. The gate to the inn-yard had hung crooked for a year, its latch broken, because the money for the smith was money for other things. One afternoon the Duke of Wexbourne, land-rich master of 10,000 acres, took off his fine coat and borrowed tools from the ostler and mended the gate latch with his own 2 hands while she watched from the kitchen window and did not breathe. When it was done he swung it twice to try it, and it closed sweet and true, and he looked up at the window where she stood, and neither of them said anything at all. And once, bent together over a ledger spread on the long table, both their hands reached at the same instant for the same figure, and stopped a half-inch apart over the page. Neither hand moved for a moment. She could feel the warmth of his across that small gap. Then she drew hers back and put it in her lap, and went on reading the column aloud as though her voice were perfectly steady, which it was not. That was the nearest they came. It was nearer than anything she had ever known. But it was the figures that undid everything, in the end. Because she was who she was, and could not help it, and the accounts he kept sending her began, slowly, to tell her a story he did not know he was telling. It began the way the rent roll had begun, on market day, with a total that did not foot. She had thought that a single slip of Crowle's. It was not. As the estate's papers passed through her hands, week upon week, the same small wrongness came again and again, always in the same place, always hidden in the same fashion. It lived in the 9th column of the great account, the column of sundry charges and allowances, the column no one troubles to check because it is small change beside the rents and the harvests. Sums went in there that did not belong, a repair charge that had not been made, an allowance to a tenant who did not exist, a little here, a little there, year upon year, patient as rot. She began to keep her own tally. On the grey slate from her apron, late at night, when the fires were banked and her father slept, she followed the 9th column back through the pages the Duke had sent her, and she added the little wrongnesses one to another, and the sum they made grew and grew until she sat one night in the cold common room and looked at what she had chalked there and felt the blood leave her face. It was near £3,200, skimmed from the Wexbourne estate, a coin at a time, over years, by a hand that knew the books well enough to hide it and believed no one would ever read them close. She knew the hand. There was only one man who kept the Duke's books, and had done for years, and had sat by the fire on market day with his face like ash, because a girl behind a counter had seen, in a single careless glance, that his rent roll was £33 short. Silas Crowle. She sat with the slate a long while in the dying light. She understood, better than most, what such a thing meant, and what it would cost to touch it. She was an innkeeper's daughter, with 53 days become 19, and a mortgage she could not pay, and a name the town was already whispering over. And she alone, in all the world, held the proof that the Duke of Wexbourne's own trusted man had robbed him of a small fortune. To carry that proof to him was to cross every line her station had drawn around her. It was to walk up to the door of Wexbourne and make herself the girl who accused a gentleman. It could ruin her. It very likely would. She looked at the number on the slate, £3,200 near enough, and every farthing of it stolen. The number was honest. It did not care about her station. It never had. That was the one thing she had always loved about numbers, and it was the thing that would not let her put the slate down and go to bed and keep herself safe. She sat there until the candle guttered. And then she made her choice. She took clean sheets of paper. She copied it all out fair, column by column, year by year, the whole patient theft laid open so that any man could follow it, even a man who did not carry his sums in his head. It took her the rest of the night. When it was done, the dawn was grey in the yard, and her hand ached, and the thing was in her keeping and could not be unknown. She did not send it. She could have sent it, folded in with the figures she returned, safe and unseen. She did not. She put on her cloak, and she walked out into the raw morning, and she went the long road north to Wexbourne herself, because some things a person must put into a hand and not a post. They tried to turn her away at the door, of course, a girl in a plain cloak, on foot, asking for the Duke. But she stood, and she waited, and word went in, and word came out, and at last she was brought across a threshold she had no right to cross, into a room finer than any she had stood in, where the Duke of Wexbourne rose from his chair in plain astonishment to see her there. "Hester," he said. "What in heaven?" She crossed the floor to him. She did not curtsy. She put the papers into his hands, her ink-stained fingers against his, and she held them there a moment so that he would understand the weight of what she was giving him. "Read them, Edmund," she said, and it was the first time she had ever called him by his name. He read them. She watched him read. The room was very quiet, and the fire spoke to itself in the grate, and outside somewhere a groom was calling to a horse. Edmund did not sit. He stood by the window with the light falling across the pages, and his finger moved down the columns the way a man moves his hand along a wall in the dark. He came to the 9th column. She saw the moment he understood. His shoulders went still. How long? He said. Years, she said. It begins small, a shilling here, a few pounds there, then it grows bold, because no one looks. Near £3,200, Edmund, that is what the 9th column has cost you. He looked up. There was no anger in his face yet. There was only a kind of grief, the grief of a man who has trusted where he ought not. Crowle keeps these books, he said. Crowle keeps these books. He set the papers down on the table, very gently, as if they might break. Then he crossed the floor to her. He did not touch her. He stood close, closer than a duke ought to stand to an innkeeper's daughter, and she felt the warmth of him, and neither of them moved. You walked here, he said. On foot. Through the night. I did. You could have sent it. I could have. Why did you not? She looked at him. Her hand still bore the ink of her long labour. Because a man ought to hear a thing like this from a person, she said, not find it folded in with his rents, and because I wished to see your face when you knew, so that I would know you were not a part of it. Something moved in him then. He lifted his hand, and for 1 centimetre of the world he meant to touch her face. She saw it. She stood ready for it. And then the door opened, and the moment closed like a shutter, and a servant was there, and the two of them stepped apart as though the air between them had been an accusation. My lord, the servant said. Mr. Crowle is come. He asks for you. She saw the Duke's jaw set. Send him to the library, he said. I will come. The servant went. Edmund turned to her. Wait here, he said. Do not let him see you. Not yet. But Crowle had seen her. She learned that later. He had seen the plain cloak in the hall, and the mud on its hem, and the ink on the fingers of the girl from the wheatsheaf, and Silas Crowle was not a fool. He knew what a girl who reckoned bills in her head might do with a winter of his columns. He said nothing that day. He smiled, and he bowed, and he spoke of rents and repairs, and he went away. But he knew, and a man who knows he is found does not sit and wait to be taken. He begins to move. The days that followed were the longest of her life. She went home to Oldmarsh, back to the taps and the near-blind father, and the letter in the drawer beneath the ledger. 53 days had become 19. The Ridings and County Bank did not care about dukes or 9th columns. It cared about £180, and the day it fell due, and she had it not. Josiah found her at the long table one night, her head in her hands. You're tired, girl, he said. His hand found her shoulder by feel. You work too hard for an old man's alehouse. I'm well, father, she said. You've your mother's way of lying, he said, not unkindly. She'd say she was well with the roof coming down on us both. He sat beside her. His clouded eyes looked at nothing. There's a thing wrong here you've not told me. I may be blind, Hester. I'm not a stone. She almost told him then. She had the words in her mouth. But she looked at his proud old face, and she could not put the weight of it on him, and so she took his hand instead and held it. Trust me a little longer, she said. That's all. A little longer. She did not know how little longer it would be. Lady Cordelia Vane came to Wexbourne that week. Hester was not there to see it, but the county saw it, and the county talked. The carriage with the Vane arms, the lady in grey silk who stepped down at the great door as though she owned the stones of it. Her father sat on the board of the bank that held the Duke's paper, and everyone understood the shape of the thing, a land-rich Duke, distracted, in debt, a banker's daughter with a settlement that would clear it. It was not love, it was arithmetic. And Hester, of all people, knew that arithmetic wins where love has no allies. Cordelia sat with the Duke in the long drawing-room and spoke of the marriage as one speaks of a bridge to be built. Her father's bank would forgive the Wexbourne debt on the day of the wedding. It was clean. It was sensible. It was what his station required of him. There is talk, Edmund, she said, drawing off one glove, of an innkeeper's daughter. A girl who does sums. They say you send your carriage to a country tavern for no reason the roads explain. She smiled, and the smile did not reach her eyes. I do not listen to talk, but others do. A man in your position cannot afford to be laughed at. The Duke said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "The girl found near £3,000 that Kroll had stolen from me." Would you have me laugh at that? Cordelia's smile thinned. "I would have you remember what you are," she said, "and what she is. That was the day the trap closed, or the day it was set, rather. It sprang later, and it sprang hard. Kroll had been busy. A man who has stolen for years knows how to make a paper say what he wishes. He wrote a false entry into the Wexbourne accounts, a sum of money paid out, he swore. To the inn at Aldmarsh, for services and lodging, a sum far beyond anything the wheat thief had ever seen. And then he found that the same sum had gone missing from the estate strongbox. A purse. Gone, and who had been at Wexbourne, uninvited, on foot, in the dark? Who had crossed the threshold where she had no right to be? The innkeeper's girl, the one with ink on her fingers and want in her house. He laid it before witnesses. He did it cleverly, in the steward's room, before the housekeeper and 2 of the senior men, all of them sworn to the estate, and none of them fond of a jumped-up tavern wench. "Here is the entry," he said. "Here is the strong-box, and here is what it lacks. And here," he had made sure of this, "here is the debt the wheat chief carries, £180 to the county bank, near due. A desperate house. A clever girl. A missing purse. What would you conclude, gentlemen, if you were not blinded, as some are, by a pretty way with numbers?" The word ran through the county like fire through summer grass. A duke had been courting an innkeeper's daughter. That alone was scandal enough to feed 100 dinner tables. But now the girl was a thief. Now she had used her cleverness to rob the very man who had shown her kindness. The story wrote itself, and everyone who had ever resented her quick tongue and her quick sums was glad to tell it. It reached Aldmarsh on a market day. She was behind the taps when she heard it, from 2 carters who did not trouble to lower their voices, who did not know or did not care that the thief they spoke of stood pouring their ale, and her a common innkeeper's girl thieving from a duke. They'll have her in the assizes by Christmas. She set the jug down. Her hand did not shake. She had learned long ago that a number does not care about your station, and she had learned now that neither does a lie. She untied her apron. She walked out into the yard where no one could see her face, and she stood a long moment against the cold stone wall, and she let herself understand it fully. She was ruined. Not the way a poor girl is usually ruined, but ruined all the same. Her name was mud in every mouth from here to York. And in 19 days, no, it was fewer now, the bank would take the inn, and her father would learn on the same morning that he was homeless, and that his daughter was called a thief. And there was Edmund. That was the sharpest thing. Not the shame. Him, because she understood, standing there against the wall, what she was to him now. She was a scandal wearing a woman's shape. To defend her was to ruin himself, to set his rank against the whole county for a tavern girl who did sums. His blind spot had always been that his station could shield her. She had always known better. His station was the very roof that was falling on them both. She would not be his ruin. She loved him too well for that, though she had never once said the word, not even to the slate in her pocket. So she made her second choice, and it was harder than the first. She wrote him a letter. She kept it short, because a long one would have broken her. She told him she was going home to save her father's house alone. She told him not to come. She told him that a duke and a thief could have no business with one another, and that he must marry where his station and his debt required, and that she wished him well of it. She did not tell him she loved him. She signed it Hester Ainsley, plain, no more. Then she went back inside to her father and her taps and her 19 days, and she set herself to save the inn with the only thing she had ever owned, which was her own quick mind, and she told no one that her heart had gone north with the letter and would not be coming back. That should have been the end of it. In most lives it would have been, a girl of no station, crushed quietly, forgotten by spring. But Edmund Grey, Duke of Wexbourne, had learned a thing from the innkeeper's daughter that he had never learned from all his tutors. He had learned that when a lie is written into a column, the answer is not to argue with the men who believe it. The answer is to open the book. Before everyone. And let the figures speak, because figures do not care about station, and they do not care about scandal, and they cannot be shamed into silence. He did not answer her letter. He did something better. He called an audit, not a quiet one, in a steward's room among men who could be leaned upon. A public audit. He summoned the magistrates of the county to the assembly hall at Aldmarsh, the same hall where the gentry held their assemblies, where they had glanced at the tavern girl and looked away, where their whispers had first taken wing. He laid it before them as a matter of law. A great theft had been done upon the Wexbourne estate. The magistrates would sit, the books would be opened, every man with an interest would attend, and the truth would be reckoned in the open, where no one could bury it a second time. And he sent one summons more. To the wheat sheaf, to Hester Ainsley. Not as a suppliant, as a witness for the crown. She very nearly did not go. She stood with the folded summons in her hand, and every reason in the world to burn it. To go was to stand before the whole county that called her a thief. To go was to see Edmund, which she could not bear, and to be near Cordelia Vane in her grey silk, which she could bear even less. To go was to risk everything on the chance that a book opened in public would say what she knew it said. But she had spent her whole life trusting that a number is honest when a person is not. She would not stop now, at the end, when it was the only faith she had. She put on her good grey dress. She took the slate from her apron pocket and slipped it into the pocket of the dress instead, the worn chalk slate that had reckoned the Duke's bill and the estate's rents and the whole patient theft of the 9th column. And she went to the assembly hall. It was full. Gaslit and full, every bench crowded, the gentry in their finery and the townsfolk pressed at the back, and a low sound of talk that stopped, all at once, when she came through the doors. She felt every eye. She did not flush. She had not flushed the day Kroll sneered before 9 travellers, and she did not flush now. She walked up the centre of the hall with her chin level, past the faces that had whispered, to the magistrate's table where the great estate ledger lay open under the lamps. Edmund was there. She did not look at him. She could not, yet Kroll was there, at the far side, in his good coat, his leather writing case beside him on the bench, and there was a look on his face she had not seen before. Not contempt now. Something underneath the contempt. The first cold edge of fear. The chief magistrate was an old man named Harwood, with a slow voice and no patience for cleverness. He explained the matter to the hall. A sum was said to be stolen. An entry accused the wheat sheaf. A purse was gone from Wexbourne, and the Duke himself had asked that the books be read in the open by a witness who claimed to know them. "Mr. Kroll," said Harwood, "you keep these accounts." "I have kept them faithfully for 11 years, sir," said Kroll, and he stood, and his voice was smooth as it had ever been. "It grieves me past speaking that I must stand here at all. The matter is plain. There is the false entry. There is the girl who was at Wexbourne, uninvited, the very night the purse went missing. I am a man of business. I deal in facts, not in the guesses of tavern girls. I ask only that the court look at the facts. The court will look at the facts," said Harwood. He turned his slow old head. "Miss Ainsley, you are named in this. The Duke says you can read these books. Read them." She stepped up to the table. The ledger was open before her, the great columns of it, the Duke's whole estate laid out in Kroll's careful hand. She did not need the slate, but she took it out and set it down beside the ledger, the worn grey thing on the polished wood, so that they could all see what an innkeeper's daughter carried in her pocket. Then she put her finger to the page. "You will want the 9th column," she said. Her voice carried. It did not shake. "The others are honest." Mr. Kroll kept the first 8 columns very well. A clever thief keeps most of the book honest. It is only the 9th column that lies. A murmur went through the hall. "In the year 57, she said, the 9th column shows a payment of £3, 7 shillings a day for the keep of horses that the estate did not own that season. I know it did not own them, because the 4th column, which is honest, counts the horses, and there are not enough of them to eat what the 9th column pays for. The one book contradicts the other. A man who reads only the 9th column believes it. A man who reads both catches him." She turned the page. She did not look at Kroll. She read. "In the year 58, a repair to a bridge that was never broken, £12, 11 shillings and 4pence. In 59, a rent roll that foots £3 and £30 short of the sum written at its head, the same £3 and £30 I told you of, Mr. Kroll, in the common room of the Wheatsheaf, the night the axle broke, before you had found your page. You remember, you have hated me since." Kroll was on his feet. "This is," he began, "my lord, this is a performance, a recitation got up between the two of them. Sit down, Mr. Kroll," said the old magistrate, without heat. "The girl is reading the book. Let her read it." She read it. Column by column, year by year, she reconstructed the whole patient theft from the open ledger and from the memory she had carried since that long candle-lit night. She named the sums. She named the years. She showed each place where the honest columns caught the 9th one in its lie. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The hall was so silent that they could hear the gas hiss in the lamps, and every figure she spoke fell into that silence like a stone into a well, and could not be taken back. "Add them," she said at last, "every false entry, every phantom horse and mended bridge and short rent roll, 11 years of them. You will come to near £3,200. That is what the 9th column has taken from this estate." She lifted her eyes then, and for the first time she looked at Silas Kroll across the length of the hall. "You hid it in the 9th column, Mr. Kroll," she said. "I found it before the tea went cold. It broke him. Not all at once." He stood there with his mouth working, and he looked to the magistrates for the deference he had always been given, and he found none. He looked to the gentry on their benches, the men who had dined at his word, and they were looking at the ledger now, and doing the sums in their own slow heads, and finding that the tavern girl was right. "She is a thief," he said, and his smooth voice had a crack in it now. "The purse—" There was no purse, Mr. Kroll. It was Edmund who spoke. He rose. He held up a paper. The strong-box was counted this morning by the magistrate's own clerk, before witnesses. Nothing is missing from it. Nothing was ever missing. "You wrote a theft to cover a theft. It is the oldest trick in your trade, and she caught it, as she caught all the rest, because you never once believed that an innkeeper's daughter could read your columns." He set the paper down. "That was always your mistake. It was mine once too. I have unlearned it. You have not." Kroll had no more words. The magistrate nodded to the 2 constables at the door, and they came up the aisle, and they took Silas Kroll each by an arm, and they led him out of the assembly hall past the benches of the men who had believed him. He did not go quietly at the last. He turned his head as they took him through the doors, and he looked back at her, and whatever he meant to say died in his throat, because she was not looking at him at all. She had already turned back to the ledger, and was closing it, gently, the way you close a thing you are finished with. The doors shut behind him. The hall let out its breath. And then there was the matter of the room, the gentry who had whispered. They sat very still now. There was no whispering. A girl of no station had stood at the magistrate's table and reckoned £3,000 from memory faster and truer than any auditor in the county, and they had all watched her do it, and there was nothing left to say against her that the figures had not already answered. One or two of them could not meet her eye. That was its own kind of verdict. Lady Cordelia Vane sat in the second row in grey silk, and Hester watched her do the arithmetic. For Cordelia was no fool either. She had come to trade a debt for a marriage. But the debt she had come to clear, the Wexbourne paper her father's bank held, that debt was near £3,000 of it stolen and now to be recovered from Kroll's own property by order of the court. The Duke would not need her settlement now. The bridge she had come to build had no river left to cross. Hester saw the moment the sum came out even in Cordelia's head. The lady's face did not change much. It only cooled, the way a room cools when the fire is let die. She gathered her gloves from her lap, one and then the other, unhurried, a woman leaving a transaction that had not gone her way. She rose. She looked at Hester once across the crowded hall. It was not a kind look, and it was not a cruel one. It was the look of a woman conceding a column she cannot make foot. She gave a small nod, cold, precise, final, and that nod was all she said. Then she went out, grey silk and all, and the door took her too. Which left the Duke. He came round the magistrate's table. The whole hall watched him do it. He came to where she stood with her hand still on the closed ledger and the worn slate beside it, and he stopped before her, and he did not lower his voice, though every soul in the room was straining to hear. "Miss Ainsley," he said, "I owe you the recovery of my estate. I owe you the exposure of a man who robbed me for 11 years while I dined at his advice. I could pay a clerk to count my money for the rest of my life and never find such a debt as I owe you." He paused. "But that is not why I sent my carriage up the North Road all those times, on all those thin pretexts, and the county knows it, and I am done pretending otherwise before them." A sound went through the benches. He did not heed it. "I have men to count my money," he said. He said it to the whole hall, to the gentry and the townsfolk and the magistrates, so that not one of them could later claim to have misheard. Clerks and stewards and auditors, a dozen of them, and any of them slower than the woman standing before me. I did not come back to Aldmarsh for a pretty face, though hers is dear to me. I came back for the one mind in England quicker than all of yours put together." He turned back to her. He took her hand, the ink-stained one, the one that had copied out the whole theft by candlelight, and he held it in both of his, before them all. "I have asked you nothing till now because I believed my rank could shelter you from the world's cruelty, and I was wrong. It was my rank that exposed you. So I will not shelter you. I will stand beside you, in the open, where every man who called you a guesser and a thief can watch me do it." He drew a breath. "Marry me, Hester, not despite your mind. For it. There is no station in England worth more to me than the way you think." The hall did not breathe. She looked at him. She had spent her whole life certain that her station was a wall no worth could climb. She had fled him to keep from being his ruin. And here he stood, having climbed no wall at all, having simply opened the book in public until the wall was shown to be a thing painted on paper, a lie in a 9th column that honest reckoning dissolved. "You understand," she said, and her voice was low now, only for him, though the room drank it, "that I will keep the books myself. I will not have a Kroll under my roof. I will count every farthing of the Wexbourne estate to the day I die, and I will be a nuisance about it, and they told me all my life that a clever girl is a nuisance. I am counting on the nuisance," he said. "Then yes," she said. "Edmund, yes." She did not say it loudly. She did not need to. The word went into that silence the way her figures had, and could not be taken back, and this time the hall that had scorned her had no arithmetic to answer it with. Somewhere at the back, among the townsfolk, someone began to clap. And then it was more of them, and then it was most, the same town that had whispered. And the sound of it filled the gaslit hall where the gentry sat, with nothing left to say. The inn was saved. That is a smaller thing than a proposal, but it mattered to her more than she let on, because it was her father's, and it was her mother's memory, and it was the roof that had nearly fallen. The Duke would have paid the mortgage the moment he knew of it. He was affronted, gently, that she had not let him. But she paid it herself. In the end, out of the reward the court settled on her for the recovery of the estate, near £3,200 returned, and a portion of it hers by right, because the law, it turned out, could reckon a debt of gratitude when the figures were laid plain before it. She walked into the Ridings and County Bank with £180 and laid it on the counter and watched them cancel the note. Then she went home and told her father the whole of it, at last, from the beginning, and the old man wept, which she had never seen him do, and then he laughed, which was better. 1 year on, the Wheatsheaf was full again, not with the old coaching trade, the railway had taken that for good, but full of its own people, the townspeople, who came now to drink in the house of the girl who had reckoned a duke's theft from memory and married the duke for the trouble. Josiah Ainsley sat by the taps of an evening, his spectacles low on his nose, seeing little, hearing everything, and when a certain carriage came down the road at dusk, he would lift his head and say, "That's my daughter's wheels. I'd know them among 1,000. And he always did. At Wexbourne, the Duchess kept the books, her own hand, every column, the 9th as honest now as the 1st. The worn grey slate that had reckoned the bill and traced the theft was retired at last, set on a shelf in her private room where she could see it. In its place the Duke had given her a great bound account book, the leather deep and fine, and on the spine, stamped in gold, was her name. Hester Gray. Her name on the books of an estate of 10,000 acres, where once she had been told that a clever girl was a nuisance, and sent back to the scullery like she'd said nothing at all. She wrote in it every day, and now and then, closing it of an evening, she allowed herself 2 dry thoughts, and only 2, for she was not a woman given to gloating. The first was for Silas Crowle, gone to the assizes and then to worse, undone by the one column he could not make honest. He ought to have used the 10th column, she thought. There was no 10th column. That was rather the point. The second was for the world that had judged her by her plain dress and her low station and her quiet way, and had never once thought to ask what was behind them. They mistook a quiet girl for an empty one. It was the most expensive mistake in the county, and Silas Crowle had made it first, and paid for it dearest, and the gentry on their benches had made it too, and would not make it again. A mind is the one inheritance no station can withhold. Her mother had given it to her over the accounts of a failing inn, and no bank, and no duke, and no thief could take it back. That was the whole of the sum, and it footed even, and it always had. Comment the town you're watching from. I'd like to see how far Hester's story has travelled.